Of all the different kinds of commissions that I take, portraits are by far my favorite. Illustration in general is always fun and satisfying for me, but portraits are at the top of the list. So let's paint a portrait. If you're new here, welcome. My name is B. Lewis. I'm a professional artist and author, and on today's video, I'd like to share with you a fun Bridgerton-inspired portrait commission that I recently completed. So let's get into it. So this portrait was commissioned by one of my OG clients, a family who has supported me for many years and trusted me with tons of projects, and I'm super grateful to them. I was definitely excited to be able to work on this one. For this commission, I was tasked to create a poster style design that would allow party guests to be able to sign the bottom, and the only real requirements I had to meet was to incorporate lots of purple and also Virgo elements. After a little consideration, we landed on a Bridgerton theme. Now, admittedly, I never watched Bridgerton, but I did have an idea of what I wanted to create based on what I knew of the show, or at least what I thought I knew of the show. While doing some research into the Regency era, which is the time period that Bridgerton is set in, I was able to find some really cool portraits of the time that helped with the costume design of this piece. I was also lucky enough to find a poster for the show itself, which heavily inspired this particular painting. To take it a step further, and to get a real feel for the show, I ended up watching some of it for research purposes, of course. Doing so really helped solidify the vibe I was going for with this portrait, and I wanted to really make it feel like a part of this world with some of my own, of course, signature twists and artistic styles. It also was super beneficial for me to watch it so that I didn't associate certain houses or characters to this portrait without knowing who they were and what those characters represented. Before I watched the show, and as I was Googling sort of like costumes and things from the show, I was seeing hairstyles and dresses, and I was like, oh, that'll be cute in this portrait, only to watch the show and not like the characters who wore those particular clothes or hairstyles. I can't imagine how it would be to do a portrait adding random elements from Google search, only for my clients to hate the characters that those elements are associated with. Talk about setting yourself up for trouble. One thing that's super important to me with commissions and all of the commissions that I do is making sure that my clients approve and sign off on every stage of the creation process to help catch things like that early on, especially if I'm given a bit of creative license. But plenty of research goes into each and every piece that I do. If I'm just painting a copy of a photo, then no problem, I just paint what I see. But when asked to actually come up with something and to be fully creative, I want to make sure that my clients like what I come up with before I go into the actual painting itself. So this piece was done in Clip Studio Paint, and if I had to guesstimate, I'd say it took about 35 to 40 hours or so. To give a bit of comparison, the average digital portrait that I've done takes anywhere from 3 to 5 hours, maybe 6 max. My acrylic paintings can go from 5 to maybe 12 hours or so, and all of this is stretched out over the course of 2 to 3 weeks. And of course, the acrylic paintings that I do, or that I tend to do, are relatively small. The average painting commission that I get is about 16 by 20, so they don't necessarily take a long time to do. With digital work, the details drive the amount of time that it takes to complete, more so than the size of the finished file, which is why I charge different prices for the different types of digital paintings. Whereas with my acrylic paintings, I charge based on what I'm painting and how big the canvas is. For this one, I went like a whole binge for 24 hours, no sleep, just painting flowers, but it was so worth it. The first thing that I did with this piece was to create a sketch for the image. If you go back and look at some of my older digital videos or digital painting videos, I used to use a technique that required me to paint the picture in grayscale first and then color it afterwards. I did this to help me practice establishing value in my paintings, meaning establishing the scale from white to black and everything in between to create shape and form. One of the keys to realism is determining your extremes and then painting within those extremes and highlighting them in the shadow and highlight areas. For example, you may choose a spectrum that may not necessarily be from stark white to stark black, but it could be from a deep gray to an equally light gray color on the other end of the spectrum. So you paint your picture and paint everything in between those two grays, but in the shadows you would use your deepest dark that you decided to work on, and also your brightest color in your highlights, and that helps add dimension and realism to your image. Lately though, I've moved over to direct painting, and I think working on my tarot deck project has driven that, because it's already taken a while to do. Like, I figured it would take even longer to be able to or to have to do it in grayscale and then go back in color, and it does give the artwork a specific look that I didn't want to highlight in that particular project. So instead of painting the whole thing in black and white for this picture, I first create a flat layer for each element in the image. Flats are just single color layers, close to the colors that I'll use to flesh out those elements. This became super duper helpful when I moved into the flower details, because it helped me differentiate what set of flowers I was working on. One of the challenges I had with this painting was that although I'd done a sketch for it, and everything looked fine in the sketch, the flowers themselves was an amalgamation of references. It was like putting a jigsaw puzzle together, right? And I used maybe 3 or 4 flower reference images to draw them, but when I went in to paint them, I honestly couldn't tell what the heck I had drawn in the sketch. So I ended up going back into a separate file and redrawing them by themselves, and then giving them their own individual flat color to help me remember what reference to use, or what reference I used to draw them in the first place. So once I have the flat layer done, I'll begin detailing the image. The way I worked in this image was to start with the easiest part of the picture and work my way around to the most challenging components, or the components that I still was kind of unsure about. In this case, I saved her dress and her hair for the last thing that I did. I painted in the galaxy background first, which housed the Virgo constellation. After I did the galaxy, I moved over to her face, but I left her hair for the end because I wasn't quite settled on the original design. And honestly, I'm glad I did wait, because her original hair was based on a character whose name I forget, but in the first season, she was the one who caught Lady Bridgerton with the Duke in the garden in the first season. So when I got to that scene, I was like, oh no, we can't have her be the hair model. Like, there's no way I'm using that particular character for her hair. So once I completed the face and the sky, I detailed the frame, which was inspired by the Judgment card design from my Cosmic Gateways Tarot Deck project. And if you haven't had a chance to check out those cards or those images, I'll link a playlist up in the cards above, and also in the description below, for you to check out some of that work. So after I did the frame, I moved on into the flowers. Now, each set of flowers took a minimum of 2 hours to render. Minimum. I grossly underestimated how long they would take. So I set out to do them thinking like the whole lot of them would take me like 3 hours or so. Sure, I'll knock it out in a day. But once the 3 hours came around, like, I had only moved on to the second flower. As tedious as they were, and they were really tedious, I found that I really enjoyed painting flowers. I did a similar set of flowers in the tarot card illustration for the Empress from the same Cosmic Gateways Tarot Deck project, and I remember doing this deep dive into those flowers, and I was losing time, and I was like in the zone. And about halfway through, I started to wonder if I was going too far for something that the average person may not even pick up on. But you know what? The thing is, pushing yourself beyond that comfortable stop and going past the this is good enough phase of creating elevates your artwork and differentiates the professional from the hobbyist. And one of the things that I like about the flowers, other than how freaking fantastic they look, is even though I spent a lot of time on them, I was able to replicate some of the flowers here and there and add, a little more detail to them to bring cohesion to the image. So if you can't already tell, the flowers are my favorite part. I'm just saying, like, I really, really like them. Because they did take a ton of time to render, somewhere in the middle of rendering them, I decided to do the background, which was a graphic element I created by combining photo textures and color overlays. This saved me a lot of time. It really did. And it really looked nice, and it was on par with my reference inspiration image. just different enough to like I wasn't, deboing somebody else's artistic style or anything like that, but I think it was on par with our overall goal and vision for this piece. The final details included deciding on her hairstyle, putting some flowers from the frame into her hair, designing her costume, and I borrowed the necklace from, you guessed it. Again, the necklace came from my tarot deck project, because I figured like there was no real reason for me to redraw the necklace, and I had like a perfectly good and beautiful dragonfly necklace that I could add that just, it really tied everything together. And so in the middle of that, instead of keeping it the same, I added the Virgo center. I added the Virgo symbol, to the center, and it worked out real well. So although I would consider myself a multidisciplinary artist, working as a graphic designer, also an illustrator and painter, portraits are by far my favorite commissions to complete. It doesn't matter to me if I'm painting them on canvas or if I'm doing a digital painting. Like, I love to paint people, and it's such an intimate art form. I feel like painting portraits gives me an inside view of the subject that I'm painting. It's something I enjoy immensely, and I had a ball completing this one. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested in commissioning artwork from me, be sure to visit my website, BLewisArts.com, scrolling to the bottom and clicking on the services button to find out more. I'll have links for everything down in the description, and until next time, peace.